Today I'm going to talk about feeding the donkey, which will include a bit of anatomy, which may amaze you, some dimensions which may astound you, and one number you may never even have heard of. We'll also do a bit of physiology and see how camels, cows and sheep do things a bit differently. We'll go from mouth to anus and find out who really does all the hard work of food digestion. And I can tell you now, it's not the donkey. And we'll tie this in with the natural behaviour of the donkey. Once we've learned how things work, we'll see what can go wrong. In the wild, a donkey will spend at least 16 to 18 hours a day on the go, eating little and often, and only spending 2 to 3 hours in deep sleep. The donkey may need to walk up to more than half a marathon every day, eking out a living on the highly fibrous, low-calorie, scrubby vegetation it has evolved to survive on. This food is mainly made up of cellulose. Cellulose is what we call a structural carbohydrate and allows plants to stand up. Just think of grass, corn, trees. It's their equivalent of a skeleton. Now humans are unable to digest cellulose as they lack the necessary enzyme called cellulase to break it down. And here's the thing, the donkey does not produce cellulase either. More about that later. The donkey is a perfect browser with its narrow muzzle and very mobile upper lip that can insinuate between thorns to find the leaves and berries. Its front teeth are the cutters and the cheek teeth are the grinders, with the food being moved by the muscular tongue. The cheek teeth in particular have to be in perfect condition to function properly. If you think of a grinding machine, the two surfaces have to meet and oppose closely to grind effectively. The food has to be ground down into very tiny particles if it has any chance of being digested. Did you know that the donkey chews around 50,000 times a day? And did you know that a donkey can produce around 25 litres of saliva every day to help start the process of digestion and make for a moist bolus of food that travels down the narrow tube called the gullet or esophagus and into the stomach? The gullet, also called the esophagus, is a narrow tube connecting the mouth to the stomach. The connection between the gullet and the stomach is such that it is impossible for a donkey to vomit. The stomach is really small. Think of a small rugby ball. But that's okay because we know that donkeys eat little and often rather than have one big meal a day, like a dog, for example. We use the term trickle feeder to describe this feeding behaviour. The small intestine is very long and coiled, as is the large intestine, which is made up of the cecum, the large colon and the small colon. So we have at least 21 metres of tubing of varying diameters inside the relatively small donkey. The only way to get it all in is to coil it up and bend it, as you can see in the diagram. Now there's an inherent design fault here, as having sharp bends in a system renders it susceptible to blockage. And when food gets jammed at the bends, the result is impaction colic, which will require urgent veterinary treatment and can be fatal. But more of colic later. Nutrients like sugars, proteins, vitamins and minerals are processed in the stomach, which produces acids to start the digestive process, and also the small intestine. But that still leaves us with the bulk of the diet, which is made up of cellulose. Now we've already learned that the donkey does not produce the enzyme cellulase, which is the only way to digest cellulose. And here's where the number you may never even have heard of comes in. There are around a quadrillion microbes, such as fungi, bacteria, and viruses, living within the large intestine, and these do produce cellulase. In particular, in the cecum, which you could see from the diagram, is around 1 meter long and a sac-like structure, and it's really acting as a fermentation vat, where all the tiny pieces of fibrous food, as yet undigested, are worked on by the microbes, releasing vital nutrients that keeps them alive as well as the donkey. Once the microbes have extracted all the nutrients they can, the waste material accumulates in the last part of the colon, where excess water is absorbed and fecal balls produced. And because a lot of food goes in, a lot of poo comes out. Get to know what is normal for your donkey. It could be anything from 8 to 12 piles of poo landing on your paddock every day. It's always worth checking the poo periodically. If you see fibrous material that is longer than about 3 millimeters in the poo, as in the top picture, it can point to a dental problem. The grinding teeth are not doing the job they should. And of course, you could spot worms as well. And just so you know, whereas donkeys only chew their food once, cows and camels chew it twice. Food is chewed, swallowed, and then regurgitated for a second chew, a process called rumination. Even more important then, that the donkey's teeth are in good condition, as it only gets one chance to grind that food into usable fragments. And just for your interest, I've put up a picture of a human cecum, which you can see is pretty small compared to the massive organ inside that horse or donkey. So now we know how the digestive system works, let's see what we should be feeding. We need to remember that the donkey has evolved to get its energy requirements from trickle feeding on fibrous food, and we need to replicate that to keep the donkey healthy. This can best be achieved by feeding ad lib straw, the dried stalks of cereal plants such as barley. Wheat straw is a bit too brittle and sharp, and oat straw is a bit too soft. If the donkey has dental disease, he may not be able to manage long fibre, such as uncut straw, so a chopped straw product could be used instead. Straw is a great feed, but lacks some essential vitamins and minerals, so these need to be added in the form of a proprietary pelleted balancer. Check with your feed supplier and ask for a donkey-specific balancer. Do offer some browse. Ideally give your donkeys access to hedges or cut branches and logs for them to chew. Just make sure you check that what you offer is not from a poisonous species, such as yew or laurel. A little bit of hay may be added to the basic straw diet for donkeys that need to gain a bit of weight or those that struggle to keep weight on during the winter. Grass is not the best diet for donkeys, as it's high in sugars, and too much grass can lead to obesity and laminitis. Although it's probably unavoidable in the UK and other northern European countries, do limit grass intake as much as you can. The diet will need to be adjusted for the growing donkey, the pregnant donkey, and donkeys in heavy work. Donkeys are very fussy about their water, and rightly so. They really need to have clean water available all the time. And do make sure that it's not too cold in the winter, or they won't drink at all. As a desert animal, they can withstand going without water for several days, but this can lead to impaction colic, which we'll talk about later. Just add a bit of water from the kettle to take the chill off, and they will greatly appreciate it. If you don't provide the fibrous diet that the donkey really needs, he will do his best to obtain it anyway. And if you find your wooden fencing being chewed, this is not naughtiness, it's the innate need of the donkey to satisfy his requirements for fibre. Now let's have a look at what can go wrong. The cheek teeth need to grind the food into fragments of only a couple of millimeters in length if it has any chance of being processed by the microbes that we know are in the large colon. If donkeys cannot chew their food properly, they may swallow a large piece of food that gets stuck in the narrow gullet, causing the distressing condition known as choke. A vet will need to be called urgently to treat this really distressing condition quickly. I mentioned earlier that the stomach produces acids to start the process of digestion of food other than cellulose, and this acid can lead to painful ulceration of the stomach wall if the stomach is allowed to remain empty for several hours. Remember, the donkey is designed to be a trickle feeder, so should have food available all the time. In this respect, horses are very much the same, and it's a very unnatural way of managing stabled horses by offering them just 2 or 3 bucket meals a day. Thinking about the teeth again, if the food has not been reduced to tiny particles, it's more likely to lead to colic by causing a blockage of the guts. This can also happen if the donkey does not have sufficient water to drink to keep everything well lubricated in its passage along the 21 meters of guts. Another cause of colic is a sudden change of diet. The quadrillion microbes do a fantastic job of releasing nutrients for use by the donkey, but they do not react well to change. A sudden influx of a different feed can cause their death in millions, resulting in the release of toxins and an inability for the surviving microbes to process the new food. The end result can be colic, diarrhea, laminitis, and even death. Always introduce a new food over the course of at least 2 weeks, and never ever give your very resourceful donkey the opportunity to raid the feed store. Given half the chance, I promise you they will, and I've seen donkeys open the door bolts and even turn a handle. And that's a brief run-through of the inner workings of your donkey, what he should have to eat and what can go wrong. By providing the right food, getting your donkey's teeth checked regularly by a vet or qualified equine dental technician, depending on which part of the world you live in, you can do a lot to ensure the good health and happiness of your donkeys. Thanks for listening.